Bona tarda. Bona tarda a tothom. Gràcies per estar aquí. La Càtedra de Futurs Metropolitans que avui inaugurem, amb suport de Barcelona Regional, crec que és el resultat d'una llarga aspiració de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Des dels seus inicis, la UPF ha estat profundament vinculada a les estratègies urbanes i al pensament sobre la ciutat. I potser no és casual que iniciem aquesta nova etapa just quan la universitat està a punt o acaba de celebrar els 35 anys de la seva fundació. Crec sincerament que cap altra universitat de Barcelona ha tingut tan clar el seu paper dins de la ciutat. La UPF va néixer al voltant del nou barri de la Vila Olímpica, en plena transformació urbana prèvia als Jocs Olímpics, i ho va fer recuperant espais públics, simbòlics, com les antigues casernes militars, que havien allotjat els soldats de la Ciutadella després del seu enderroc. Quan parlem d'aquesta relació entre la UPF Fabra i la ciutat, crec que cal recordar els equips rectorals que han estat decisius en aquest vincle. El rector Enric Argullol, el rector fundador, va ser qui va lluitar amb determinació perquè la universitat ocupés els espais que tenim al cor de la ciutat i que gràcies a ella la UPF Fabra forma part física i simbòlica del centre urbà i també va donar suports en el seu moment a la creació del ja desaparegut Institut d'Estudis Territorials. Més recentment, el rector Jaume Casals va apostar amb convicció per impulsar estudis de grau i màster en l'àmbit urbà, en col·laboració amb l'Ajuntament i amb institucions com l'IAC o Media Urban. En alguns d'aquests projectes vaig tenir la sort que em convidessin a participar. Van ser intents valents, ambiciosos, que malauradament no van acabar de fructificar, però que van deixar un llegat i una intuïció, la necessitat que la UPF tingués algun dia titulacions i espais de reflexió sobre estudis urbans. D'alguna manera, aquesta càtedra també neix d'aquella intuïció compartida. També podem dir, amb orgull, que diverses persones que han tingut responsabilitats claus en la política urbana de Barcelona s'han format o han estat vinculades a la nostra universitat. És el cas de l'actual primera tinenta d'alcalde, la Laia Bonet, o de l'anterior regidora d'urbanisme, la Janet Sanz, o abans d'ella, la Laia Ortiz, totes elles amb vincles acadèmics i intel·lectuals amb la UPF. Aquest fet reflecteix com la universitat ha contribuït des del coneixement i la formació a pensar, debatre i transformar la Barcelona metropolitana. És, per tant, del tot lògic que avui tinguem un espai de reflexió propi sobre els fets urbans i metropolitans, obert a totes les universitats, a tots els centres de recerca i també a la ciutadania. Un espai que vol mirar a la ciutat des d'una perspectiva interdisciplinària, crítica i propositiva. M'agrada especialment que aquesta càtedra neixi dins d'un departament d'humanitats, perquè parlar de ciutat és, en el fons, parlar d'humanisme, de convivència, de diversitat, d'imaginació col·lectiva i de com projectem futurs compartits. Vull aprofitar per agrair molt sincerament a la rectora Laia de Nadal, amb el seu nom la vicerectora Elena Ramailino, pel seu suport institucional i per creure en aquest projecte des del primer moment. A la vicerectora de Transferència, Vanessa Daza, pel seu impuls i acompanyament a la creació de la càtedra. A la Bàrbara Pons, per la seva energia inagotable i per haver tingut la idea de crear aquesta càtedra pensant en la UPF i també pensant en mi com a director. Potser s'ha equivocat. També vull agrair a tot el seu equip que han fet una feina ingent perquè això tirés endavant. Finalment, a la Mireia Belil, directora del Departament d'Humanitats i companya de moltes aventures al llarg dels anys, per haver acollit i donat impuls a aquesta iniciativa amb tanta generositat. I acabo. La Càtedra UPF Barcelona Regional sobre futurs metropolitans neix amb la vocació clara de convertir-se en un laboratori d'idees i d'accions sobre els reptes de les metròpolis globals del segle XXI. Volem connectar coneixement acadèmic amb la pràctica professional, impulsar el talent jove i contribuir a imaginar i construir ciutats més sostenibles, justes i creatives. Treballarem en 3 grans àmbits: formació, a través de premis, beques i activitats docents en Barcelona Regional, recerca i transferència de coneixement, promovent projectes sobre planificació, mobilitat, energia i justícia ambiental, i acció cultural i social obrint la universitat al territori metropolità, col·laborant amb xarxes de ciutats i amb iniciatives de transformació ecològica i ciutadana. En definitiva, aquesta càtedra vol ser un pont entre la universitat i la ciutat, entre el pensament i l'acció, entre la reflexió i la imaginació del futur. I voldria acabar amb el record d'un altre apassionat de Barcelona, en Lluís Permanyer. cronista de la ciutat durant dècades i que ens ha deixat recentment. La seva mirada curiosa, crítica i estimada sobre Barcelona ens recorda la importància de comprendre la ciutat com un ésser viu, en constant transformació, i d'alguna manera també ens sentim proper perquè el seu fill, el Marc Permanyer, forma part d'aquesta casa com a responsable de Relacions Institucionals i Protocols de la UPF, i que també ha ajudat a muntar aquest sarau d'avui. Moltes gràcies i benvinguts a aquesta nova etapa col·lectiva de reflexió, cooperació, compromís amb els futurs metropolitans. Gràcies.
Jo faré una molt breu introducció després d'aquesta introducció institucional del Toni. Benvinguts, benvingudes, moltes gràcies per estar aquí. Welcome everyone. To my students in the back, don't worry, the debate will be in English. We're just doing the introductions in Catalan. Institutional, we will shift to English briefly. Però deixeu-me continuar en català per explicar breument què és Barcelona Regional, perquè els meus estudiants ja ho saben, que jo ho explico a classe, encara no ho he explicat, ho explicaré en un parell de setmanes al semestre, però explicar també, evidentment tots els que esteu aquí sabeu de sobre què és la universitat, la Pompeu Fabra, però Barcelona Regional potser no ho sabeu, però només dic que són fills de la mateixa època, dels anys 90, d'uns equips a l'Ajuntament de Barcelona excepcionals. Tenim aquí el Joan Clos, que ja hi era, en aquells equips que van concebre tot un seguit d'instruments fonamentals per cimentar la Barcelona metropolitana i regional que tenim avui. I Barcelona Regional es va crear al finals de l'any 93, va començar a funcionar l'any 94 com una agència de planificació urbana a partir de l'equip que havia fet tota la transformació olímpica entre l'any 86 i l'any 92 i 93, un equip d'arquitectes i enginyers que van pensar i van fer la transformació de la ciutat d'una manera diferent, treballant plegats. Aquest know-how, en aquell moment dirigit per l'arquitecte Antoni Luna, que després va ser el primer arquitecte en cap en els mandats del Joan Clos, van realment fer possible una transformació espectacular de la ciutat, que avui en dia, si mirem fotos de com era Barcelona, la Barcelona, aquest barri només als anys 90, en el moment que es va crear aquesta universitat i Barcelona Regional, els estudiants que no havien nascut encara es farien creus de com era aquesta ciutat, aquests barris tan a prop del centre en aquella època. Doncs Barcelona Regional és una agència de planificació que ha crescut molt, ja té 31 anys d'història, ara som al voltant de 100 persones, tenim sempre alguns becaris, estudiants. Tenim personal de 17 disciplines diferents, fonamentalment arquitectes, enginyers, però també ambientalistes, sociòlegs, geògrafs, economistes, en fi, fins a 17 disciplines, altament qualificada. El 97% són llicenciats superiors, el 85% tenen màster, el 5% tenen un doctorat i ens dediquem a fer possible les transformacions. Reflexionem, però també fem projectes amb encaix territorial i multidisciplinar. I si algú té més interès, allà està la nostra pàgina web. Però el tema de la transferència de coneixement, d'estar a prop del coneixement acadèmic i poder traspassar-lo a les polítiques públiques i als projectes de transformació ha estat sempre en l'ADN d'aquesta agència. I de fet em va sorprendre perquè Juan Carlos Montiel, que avui no ha pogut venir perquè està en una altra reunió que jo havia d'haver estat, però em va explicar una anècdota que jo no sé si, Joan, tu la saps, però em va explicar una anècdota molt interessant, que aquesta voluntat de fer un espai acadèmic conjunt entre Barcelona Regional i la Universitat Pompeu Fabra no és d'ara, sinó que ja a finals dels 90, amb el primer rector, va haver-hi una iniciativa per fer una escola d'arquitectura aquí a la Pompeu Fabra, que l'anava a dirigir l'Antoni Luna. I quan van ser consultats alguns catedràtics de la UPC van dir ni parlar-ne. I aleshores, allò es va aturar en aquell moment, però ara hem fet un nou espai, pensem que tots els espais sumen, això és una càtedra, és un espai més flexible, més obert i que vol directament fer transferència de coneixement i un espai de trobada entre els estudiants que tenen inquietuds urbanes, que fan treballs final de grau, treballs final de màster, que fan doctorat, fer esdeveniments, donar premis, tenim tot un seguit d'activitats que estem acabant d'endreçar, hem creat una pàgina web que ja està creada, si algú té interès, en 3 idiomes i que estem nodrint. Aquest esdeveniment estarà gravat i estarà disponible en aquesta pàgina web i el dilluns fem una segona presentació de la càtedra més al públic obert de l'Smart City Expo. La setmana que ve hi ha aquest congrés sobre ciutats, que és molt important, i en aquest context el dilluns hem creat una jornada, tota la informació la tenim disponible en la web també, on presentarem aquesta càtedra amb més debats, més temàtiques, per anar definint a què es dedicarà aquesta càtedra en el primer trienni que estem acabant de planificar. Aprofito ara les últimes paraules per agrair a la representació de la universitat, donar molt les gràcies perquè ha sigut un espai molt confortable per treballar. Esperem, amb el Toni, poder fer coses molt interessants i interessants pels dos, tant per l'administració i tot l'accionariat de Barcelona Regional, com per la universitat, els seus estudiants, els seus professors i investigadors. I sense més, crec que hem vingut aquí tots a escoltar el debat que hi ha a continuació, acabar amb els meus agraïments i que continuem endavant el debat. Moltes gràcies.
Good afternoon to all of you. Be welcome to this session, the first conversation of the Càtedra, and I hope not the last. My name is Mireia Belil, M-I-R-E-I-A, impossible to spell for any native English speaker. And I am in charge of moderating this first conversation between Greg Clark and Joan Clos. Let me introduce them briefly to you. Joan Clos is the former mayor of Barcelona, and whose leadership between 1997 and 2006 shaped the city's identity of the first 20 years of the 21st century. From the universal forum of cultures that not everybody likes, to the visionary 22-act innovation district, and the reimagining of the Diagonal Mar, his legacy is woven into the fabric of this city. His impact continued on a global stage as Minister of Tourism, Industry, Tourism, and Trade of the Spanish government, and later on as Executive Director of UN Habitat. In the meeting of Habitat 3 in Quito in 2016, the new urban agenda was approved and adopted by 180 countries, approx. Joining him, we have Professor Greg Clark. He comes from London, and he's a globally recognized expert in urban and metropolitan development, with experience advising over 300 cities, and with his insights guiding strategies from the World Bank, the OECD, and the C40 network. He's a prolific author and a trusted voice in both academic and professional circles. Furthermore, he is the creator and developer of two of the best podcasts on cities, The Century of Cities and The DNA of Cities, which I highly recommend to you. Okay, together, those two speakers bring decades of wisdom, of vision, of global perspective to today's conversation. And both share the passion for cities, which makes it quite a challenging thing for me to moderate them, because when they start talking, they are carried away. So I'll try my best with them. Let's start with, that was not me. Let's move into the topic. Okay, what if the key to solving our planet's biggest challenges isn't found in a remote green wilderness, but right in the heart of our busiest cities. The city of the future won't be science fiction. It will be like today's, hopefully better, more connected, more resilient, more human across the globe. Pioneering cities are already turning this vision into sustainability, into reality. Today, our conversation moves beyond the why of sustainability to the how. What practical conditions must we strengthen to transform metro areas into thriving, resilient ecosystems? As cities continue to grow, and they will mention that with detail, they also face mounting environmental strains, infrastructural complexities, social inequalities. Within this challenge lies an immense opportunity for all of us. The metropolis is not merely a concentration of people and buildings. It's a powerful engine for climate action, a canvas for inclusive design, a laboratory of innovation, as we will see along this conversation. Barcelona, our host city, and a global reference in urban innovation, tries to integrate climate action, social equity, and digital transformation into the urban strategy it develops. By aligning local policies with global urban agendas, Barcelona reinforces its role as a city that leads by example. Still, much remains to be done. Our speakers will explore the conditions that make sustainability not just a policy, but a lived experience. Together, we'll unpack what it truly makes to strengthen the sustainable city, asking not just what it works, but what it can be scaled. This is a strategic conversation because behind every successful urban transformation lies a story of collaboration, of knowledge, of creativity, and courage that many times lacks in our political will. I would invite you to listen closely, to challenge the assumptions, and imagine what your city would look like in the future. So let's begin with our conversation. Just to start, let's share a vision. In this century of cities, how would you define a sustainable metropolis? Greg, would you start?
Sure, thank you very much, and thank you, Mireia, and Dr. Clos, a real honor to be on the stage with you. And let me just say a big congratulations to Professor Antoni Luna and Dr. Bàrbara Pons for the launch of this Càtedra in the sustainable metropolis. It's exciting to be here. I would define it like this. In 1980, 2.3 billion people lived in cities. By 2080, 9.2 billion people will live in cities, a multiplication of 4, and the planet didn't change its size, right? So the planet is constant, the population is exponential. The question about what makes any city sustainable is a question that's ecological and environmental.
Laura.
It's about its carrying capacity. It's an economic question about its job space, its resources, its fiscal capability. It's an institutional question about its governance, its management, and its leadership. It's also a social question about its consent, its participation, the contract that exists between the people and the city, and it's also political. A sustainable city has to be part of a system of cities within a nation, a region, a continent. We usually summarize all of this as saying the city must be clean, connected, and compact, and it must pay attention to its infrastructure, its investment, and its innovation. That's a sustainable city. But what's a sustainable metropolis? Sustainable metropolis is not just one city, but a collection of cities, towns, neighboring municipalities, all in one location. In Barcelona, I think it's 36. In Los Angeles, 198. In London, it's 33. So a sustainable metropolis doesn't just require a sustainable city. It requires coordination, collaboration, institutions that are flexible and agile and dynamic, and in particular, it requires some kind of common purpose between them. Finally, what's an unsustainable metropolis? An unsustainable metropolis is a metropolis that doesn't anticipate change, that thinks that the present is constant, doesn't anticipate the change in population, the change in the economy, doesn't anticipate the needs of infrastructure in the future. And most importantly, these days, an unsustainable metropolis is one that doesn't anticipate its relationship with the rest of the country or the region in which it is based. In other words, the social contract with its nation has become very important.
Thank you, Greg. What would you add to that?
Yes, metropolis, it's a form of being in the planet. Living in a metropolis is a form of living in the planet nowadays, and this has been chosen by more and more population. Now 65% of the world population is already urbanized, and the urbanization is growing very fast because urbanization has a number of deliveries, some of them positive, some others negatives, but in general positive, adding the ones and the others, the outcome is a positive, and this is why they grow. This is why urbanization and metropolitanization grows. The fact that happens in a metropolis, in a well-organized city, is that the proximity of knowledge, people, technology and services increases the productivity of the population. The population is able to produce more, even more knowledge, because now we are coming to the age of knowledge, than in less dense human habitats. And this is why the metropolitanization is happening even without any specific incentive. There's no government who pays the people to go to the metropolis. It's just the contrary. In many countries in the world, the governments pay the people to remain in the rural areas. The incentives should be placed in the places where people don't want to go. And the places where people want to go, there's no need to put an additional subsidy. These economies of agglomeration, like the economic geography named them 30 years ago, it's already something very well established at an academic level. In English, economies of agglomeration, it has been accepted easily. Krugman was one of the sellers of the idea at the beginning. But in Spanish language and in many other European language, agglomeration has a negative bias. And I prefer to call economies of urbanization, which is different than economies of localization. Then if we have some time in another year, we will establish clearly what are the differences between economics of localization, economics of agglomeration, and economies of scale, which a lot of people confuse mixes together, but is not the same. If we grasp a little bit and we go in depth in the analysis, the economies of agglomeration, it's mainly about the proximity of the factors of production in the economical ecosystem, and this proximity increases the efficiency of the productivity engine, and you obtain more input with more output with less input. Therefore, there's a reason why the people go to the cities, and several reasons. The salaries are higher because of economies of agglomeration, productivity is higher, etc., etc. Prices are higher, of course, but this, is something which is a derivative, is not the cause. This is an effect. And I think that the sustainability of this metropolitan area should be related with the rules and regulations and the political and moral, ethical governance that it's in charge of this kind of artifact of the humans, created by the humans, the metropolis.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back later on rules and regulations. You both mentioned that cities are growing, aging, diversifying all at once. So the question would be, how do these changes redefine the core goals of urban sustainability? Joan, do you want to start?
How we define the...
How the demographic changes will redefine the core of the urban sustainability?
No, I don't think that this is not going to be very relevant. Because the increased productivity of the city is very high. Some who have there to count that, there's not much economists who have there to count that, but some people who have there to begin to count that, it seems that the economy of productivity of the city can be something like between 20 and 25% higher than the low density urban areas. Serendipity, the proximity of one and the other, the generation of ideas, and this is more related to our natural conditions as humans and our even psychology as the human animal than to any other specific magic question. We are a cooperative by selection, natural selection. We have been working together between us, fighting quite often also, but at the same time cooperating. And when we cooperate in a given direction, in general the results are very specific. Therefore, the aging, of course, the aging is something that is going to happen, or is happening already very fast. But I don't think that it's going to be a very change, definitive change. There are old people who are stupid, and some of them they are wise, and also happens with the young people.
Yeah, that's true. Greg, do you agree with that? Not with the stupidity.
I agree with everything that Dr. Clos has said, and I suppose two other points I would make, and then I want to make a different kind of comment. But as well as the economies of agglomeration, of course, we've got the diseconomies of agglomeration, which are all to do with the congestion and the other kinds of challenges that we get in cities and metropolitan areas if they're not well managed, with my infrastructure, innovation and investment point, right? And at the same time, we have the economies of disagglomeration that happen outside of the metropolitan areas, the left behind cities, regions, towns and places that are not part of this. So this is all part of a picture, if you like, of the way our economies are changing through the urbanization process, very much fueled by technology. So I agree with Dr. Clos. I think there's the other parts of that story. But you were asking a question about demographics. So I just want to come back and say, so 8.2 billion people in the world today, as Dr. Clos said, 65% living in urban areas. Another 2 billion to come. By 2080, we get to about 10.2 billion people. UN population projections are going to look again at this. Birth rates are falling drastically in almost every region of the world. But if you take the 10.2 billion we're on the way to, when I told you 9.2 billion people will be living in urban areas, you can see the world in three groups. Those where the population has already peaked and is already declining, Europe, Northeast Asia, China. Those that are in the middle, where the population is on average stable, but some countries are losing, some countries are gaining. You'd put into that group, I think, Latin America, North America, Oceania. And then the regions of the world where population is still growing, of course, India, Africa, parts of forgive me for the Middle East in particular. And parts of Southeast Asia. So the urbanization process is happening in different ways, in different regions, depending upon the demographic trends that underpin them. So your question was, how do the demographics change our ideas about the sustainable city? So the sustainable city these days in Latin America is very much focused on how to retrofit the megacities and how to help the smaller, faster growing cities become sustainable. In Japan and in Korea, the sustainable city is a metropolitan area of 35 million people that you're trying to help to be sustainable. But the sustainable city in Europe is a very mixed combination of metropolitan areas of 10 million people and then lots of networks of smaller cities and towns interacting with each other in different ways. Whereas the sustainable city in Africa is now about how we embrace informality at every scale of urbanization and try to help them become sustainable. So I'm very wary of saying the sustainable city is. It depends on where you're talking about what makes a city sustainable. The population differences are very big. But one thing I think is really key, I just want to emphasize again, that I think the social contract between the process of urbanization, the urban governance, whatever it is, to the extent there is some, and the population remains the key underpinning of being able to navigate change. So I'm one of those people who believes that social capital is produced and reproduced or destroyed at the local and urban level, and that social capital is the critical thing in enabling agility and change to occur. Without social capital, there's no innovation. Without social capital, there's no advantages of agglomeration either.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think that my colleagues of the UN now are beginning to review the projections of demographic projections.
That's right.
In order to lower a little bit the expectative of what is going to happen in the next 30, 40 years. It seems that perhaps there's some chances that we even don't reach 10 billion. Because the speed at which the fertility rate is decreasing, even in Africa, it's spectacular. You know, we need to remember that the pill was commercialized at the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s. And the effect that the pill has had in the demographic behavior of the population of the world during these 70 years or 60 years, it's extraordinary. And you know, this is one thing. And the other thing is the amount of migrations. when I just began my mayorship in 96, the population of foreigners in Barcelona was 2%, now is 23%, in only 25 years. Of course, migration now has become a political hot topic, and perhaps we are going to assist a kind of wave against immigration, but perhaps not, because the developing countries, they need immigration. The experiment of Japan to be a very highly developed country and not accepting immigration, it's very painful, and they are suffering a lot in terms of their prosperity and in terms of their wealth and in many other things. Therefore, by the way, when the immigrants come to economies like ours, they begin to reproduce at the levels of our society, not at the levels of their previous society. And even in Latin America, and Africa, the fertility rate is decreasing because the knowledge, the capital in form of knowledge that our societies accumulate make the people more conscious about the situation, even in Africa. Even the governments in Africa, they cannot fight against internet, television, or mass communication, etc. And therefore there's a lot of people who begin to behave in a more, let's say, international fashion. Therefore, although I know that overpopulation is something that we still begin to say, keep saying that it's a risk for our society, I am also a little bit skeptical of that. We are now 8 billion or something more, a little bit more, and I think that we can cope with 8 billion. And if we are 10 billion, so what? Because even we all fit in the geography of Spain. The 8 billion, in a well-planned city, they will fit in the geography of Spain. It's not something, you know, the urbanized land in the planet, I think it's 2% or something like that.
3. I think it's 3.
Well, could be. But by the way, this is for the sprawl.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we do a proper urbanization with 2%, we have enough, no?
Yeah.
Correct.
Can I add to this, Dr. Clos? Because you're absolutely right that there is a big debate about whether we will reach 10 billion. Some people even say we won't reach 9 billion, right? And this demographic transition that is happening is being accelerated, but it's at different points in the cycle in different parts of the world. But 3 big implications, I think, come from this. Whatever happens, it's clear that even with demographic decline, urbanization is still increasing. So we're talking about a planet where as population rises, the main form of settlement is urbanization, whether it's mega regions, metropolitan areas, networked cities and towns, doesn't matter, it's urbanization. And then the points that you rightly raise about migration, and the partner of migration in this is climate change, right? So 9 billion, 9.5 billion, however many it is, the problem is that large parts of the planet where humans are being produced are going to become uninhabitable. So the push factors that are driving migration, especially climate change and resource depletion and uncertainty, are going to lead to a vastly increased migration, other things being equal. And then, as Dr. Clos says, the politics of that migration are really unclear and unsettled. And all we can see at the moment is that those politics are very difficult. That's implication number one. Implication number two is that many of the cities that are growing and have been growing in the last 50 years might decline. And so it's not clear that it's certainly not the case that every city will decline its population at the same average rate. Some cities will win, some cities will lose. So we have to prepare cities both for growth and for decline simultaneously, which means adaptability right at the heart of our urban form. Very challenging.
Yeah.
Okay, can we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Because whether demography impacts or not, we know that we have metropolitan areas, and we have a lot of metropolitan areas that go beyond the traditional boundaries of local government. And that's an important issue for governance, as you mentioned, both of you. So how do we govern what has no clear border?
Yes, the administrative border, sorry, may I?
Please.
The administrative borders, it's something that in every local political situation has their own specific history. And you don't change the boundaries of your municipality or your province or your region or your nation every 2 weeks. Then it's a political construct that tends to last, unfortunately. There has been some movements in different countries. In the UK, I remember when it was this reform of the local authority. I happened to live there when that happened, where the 200,000 inhabitants units were created as, in a way, a substitution of the small municipalities. Here it was the creation of the comarca as something that it was intended to be a kind of aggregation. Then, as we don't like the provinces in Catalonia, we invented another aggregation, which is the vegueria, which is very similar to... Then the Catholic Church has its own boundaries in geographic terms. By the way, where the registers of newborns are still done by parroquias, and these kind of things, funny things, but this is history. And I think that the concept of the new functional areas, which were first invented in United States and then invented in Europe and in the European Union, etc., about more abstract and technocratic measurements of human agglomeration related to mobility and population. It's probably a unit of analysis which is more reasonable than the municipalities. For example, Madrid, it's a one municipality, and it has 600 square kilometers. Barcelona, Barcelona municipality, it has 100 square kilometers, and the 33 municipalities that you mentioned, it's like Madrid local authority. It's exactly the same. If you take the two maps, the map of the municipality of Barcelona and the map of municipality of the metropolitan area of Barcelona and the municipality of Madrid is equal, exactly equal. But the issue was that Franco, the dictator, after the Civil War, accepted the integration by decree of the 30-something municipalities around Madrid, and when Barcelona asked for that, he said no. That's it. And that brings me to another topic, which is governance. This issue, what is at stake now in the world, and I think what is relevant substantially, is which kind of political model or governance system do you have, not only for countries or for continents, but also for municipalities and aggregation of municipalities. And this is something that it's not easily debatable, because as the electoral system is governed by municipalities as constituencies, then everybody is very reluctant to change that, except in the United States, where gerrymandering is something that they do as a sport every 4 years to see if they can grasp a little bit and to change some of these variable states that depend on 1 or 2 thousands of votes. But anyway, apart from gerrymandering, the stability of the administrative system, it has a kind of mystical acceptance, even as we see in the case of Barcelona, even if very fast in history, just in a couple of decades, you see that the reality is totally inadequate, and it should be modified.
Let me jump in before you give your answer with a tricky question. Can local politicians, or are local politicians ready and able to manage metropolitan phenomena? Well, sorry.
Please.
Yes, of course. Of course, some politicians should be there and manage the metropolitan region, and the way of how you choose these politicians is a question of how you organize your governance system. But I assisted to the creation of the mayors of London, Manchester, etc., and I remember the unstoppable debates about the electoral system, etc., the powers of the London mayor, which at the beginning they were very ridiculous, but now I think they are a little bit better. I followed the transformation of Montreal, which was very similar, with the only difference that the one who became the mayor of Montreal, it was one of the mayors of one of the municipalities of the periphery. But anyway, none of these cities have changed. They have, I hope, in London, increased their management and efficiency of the metropolitan transportation, the tube and other mobility, and perhaps a little bit of urban planning. I don't know about Montreal, but probably they are a little better off with the proper metropolitan government.
Right.
Well, let me try to ground this in some silly comments, just for a minute. So, you live in an area where the population is growing, and it's growing not in one municipality, but in many neighboring municipalities. What's the problem? Right? In one municipality, they have a football team that wears blue. In another municipality, they have a football team that wears red. No problem. Trivial, okay? In another municipality, they empty the dustbins on Monday. In the one next door, they do it on Tuesday. No problem, right? What happens when, in one municipality, they say the property tax here is 5%, and in the neighboring municipality, they say the property tax here is 10%. Or in one municipality, they say, if the property tax there is 10%, here it's 9%. Or they say, we need a university. And they say, well, we want a university. And then we want a university. No, we need a hospital. No, we want a hospital. Well, we will have an airport. You can't use our airport. So this is what we're talking about. The problem of fragmentation of the metropolitan area into a multiplicity of municipalities where some say, well, we would only like houses in our municipality which cost at least 2 million euros. and another says, we will have in our municipality any houses at any price. What happens to the society there? The segregation effect of these competitive policies between the municipalities. So this is the problem, right? Within one functional metropolitan area, too many municipalities can pursue competitive policies which in their own way have a logic, but in combination they create a chaos. And they create a chaos which is socially expensive, environmentally expensive, politically expensive, and economically expensive. So that's why we worry about the metropolis, the future of the metropolis, the governance of the metropolis, because the risk is massive coordination failure. Now, Dr. Clos has studied all of this, many, many times, and I think everything he said is correct. The thing I want to throw light on is that I do think, as Mireia asked us, it is possible for local politicians to manage the metropolitan area. But I believe they need formal structures through which they can do it. So it's possible for the elected mayors of 33 municipalities to be in a common board which has the authority to manage the metropolitan area, but they have to have the incentive to act in the interests of the whole metropolitan area, not just to act in the interests of the municipality where they are elected. And somebody once told me that the only job of politicians is to be re-elected. So if that is true, then the difficulty for locally elected leaders to act with a metropolitan logic is very, very high from a political science perspective. So you have to create institutions that really encourage them to have a metropolitan perspective. And Dr. Clos is right. In the UK where I live, we have 3 different kinds of metropolitan government. In London, we have a directly elected mayor who is elected by all of the people of London, so 5 million people from the 9.2 million people who could participate vote for that mayor. That mayor has to respond to everyone. In Manchester, we have a combined authority. The leaders of the 9 municipalities in the metropolitan area form a cabinet to manage the metropolitan area, but they have a directly elected mayor to work with. So the directly elected mayor has in his cabinet the directly elected leaders of the municipalities. Interesting. And then in Glasgow, we have no directly elected mayor, but we have the 9 members of the local authorities creating a cabinet to try to manage the metropolitan area. The incentive they have is transfer payments from the national governments to make them do it. So each of these models can work, but they don't always work. And then you have the bigger problem, I think, that in the past, the metropolitan geography seemed to be a little bit permanent. More or less the metropolitan area would stay the same for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We're experiencing a big acceleration in the change in human settlement and economic location of industries with polycentric industrial areas and much more. So these geographies of metropolitan governance need to be as flexible and as dynamic as the geographies of metropolitan population and economy. So flexibility is really key.
Let me ask you something. In one of your papers, you said that there are good organizations doing good things in the wrong geographies.
Yes.
Are you referring exactly to that?
Yeah, yes, in a way. So we have this phenomena, I think, that everybody knows. In every metropolitan area, there's one organization that everybody thinks is really good. That organization is great. If only that organization was in charge of this activity so that it was doing the right thing. This is very, very common, more common than we ever discuss. So we have good organizations, sometimes working only in half of the metropolitan area, typically providing good public transport in half of the area, and in the other half of the area, the public transport doesn't work. So you have a good organization doing the right things, but in the wrong geography. Needs to be a much bigger geography. Or you sometimes get a good organization doing some of the right things in some of the right areas, but not doing all of the right things. So you see this in New York City, of course, where you have a transport organization that's in charge of the trains, but not in charge of the buses or the subway, and vice versa. Dr. Clos mentioned London, Transport for London. I just finished 9 years on the board of Transport for London. One thing we have done, the one really good thing in London, is that all of the transport is in the control of one organisation, which is very helpful in the metropolitan area. So this problem exists. So the good organisations are often the ones that are unwilling to be reformed. They're the ones that need to grow and improve.
Well, thank you. And as you mentioned it quite a lot of times, let's move to mobility.
Yeah.
Because that's like the escalaton of the metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
Mobility is both a promise of freedom and a source of inequalities. How do you reconcile both?
Well, shall I start?
Yeah.
Dr. Clos? Yeah. So
What do you think?
well, let's just say very clearly that the word mobility is a very general word, Mireia. So I'm going to say that I think the sustainable metropolis is on a pathway towards sustainable mobility. And sustainable mobility, as I think we'll all know, is going to be public transport that's electrified. It's going to be walking, cycling, and multimodal transport systems. It's going to be systems that are integrated with single ticketing, single payment systems, single information services, where they are customer-oriented, not institution-oriented. And if we can create that kind of comprehensive mobility option, then I believe that public transport and integrated transport, sustainable transport, is urban planning, is social inclusion, is agglomeration enhancing, and is the thing that every metropolis needs if it's going to avoid those problems I described before of the balkanization of the metropolitan area. So I don't see how mobility is a problem if mobility is provided in a sustainable way. Everybody here has probably heard the famous quote. It may even be Dr. Clos who first said it, that, the great city is not the city where the poor people drive a car. It's the city where the rich people ride in the bus, right?
No, I was not.
You were not the person.
But I agree. Yes. Mobility, it's a quintessential factor in metropolitanization. In many cities of the world, in many metropolis, the metro is called metro because it represents metropolis. Therefore, even in the name, the exception is the tube, but this is another history. But the metropolitanization, is very interesting because metro was introduced 130 years ago, 140 years ago. It very rapidly was underground in London and in other parts of the world, and it make a big difference in the economic capacity of the city. Then if we talk about economies of agglomeration, it's very high correlation between economies of correlation and efficiency on the metro system and the metropolitan transportation system. If you can move the people in a short period of time and comfortably and without contamination, etc., you have a city with a huge asset. By the way, it's very expensive, extremely expensive, and is one of the reasons why cities tend to have a tax system that used to be higher, although in many parts of the world, including us, the capital investment is done by the central government and the regional government, but the running cost is covered half by the tickets and the other half by subsidies. But these subsidies yearly, it can represent a lot. But this goes in balance with economies of agglomeration. You live in a place where you produce more, you earn more, but you pay more for the mobility system. It's a kind of balance. There are always some intentions of benefit from the system and becoming free rider in the periphery with this kind of transportation systems. But this is a minor problem. In fact, if we take the example of the definition of the urban functional area, it's defined by the metro, because the way that the urban functional urban area is defined is by the percentage of the people in your municipality who lives in the municipality but works outside your municipality. And when that goes over 15%, then you begin to form part of the urban agglomeration. Okay? Therefore, if we can define a lot of cities in the world by their public transportation system, all the metropolitan areas are defined by the transportation system. And there are two kinds of policies around the world. Is that there are the governments who invest in metro when the different areas are already populated, and then they dig behind, or there are others who they draw the lines before, build the lines before, and then promote the urbanization around the lines of transportation, which is very different, and you need to anticipate. It's cheaper, but you need to anticipate the capital expenditure. You know, in mature democracies, you see more of the second and less of the first. But it's very interesting. We have had something like 40 or 45 years since the 70s till 2015, when in the West nobody was enlarging the metro. So only small additions complementing some lines. But Asia was building hundreds of metros. And then we saw how East companies in Japan, in China, etc., they began to manufacture trains and machines and these kind of things. And the current ones here in the West, they were bankrupting, they were disappearing for lack of demand. I think that now this is going to balance a little bit, because our cities, thanks to the immigration, now they are growing again. Barcelona is growing 5 or 6% yearly, even if our local population is diminishing. That means that the growth, all of it, is from immigration. And therefore, the metropolitan area funcional urbana, the urban functional area, it's increasing in Barcelona. Now it's nearly 4,000 square kilometers. By the way, comparing Barcelona and Madrid, at that level of 4,000 square kilometers, again, we keep being very similar.
Can can I add a couple of examples, Mireia, about the transport just for a minute? Because as Dr. Clos says, there's been a massive investment in transportation systems, metropolitan transit in Asia. Now, of course, it's happening in the Middle East in a very strong way. It's also, of course, happening in India. But even in Europe, we do see some examples of big expansion of metropolitan transport. So if we take Oslo in Norway, the fastest growing capital city in Europe, 6 new lines have been added in the last 10 years. So it's not that Europe is dead. Paris, the Grand Paris Express, 260 kilometers, 68 stations, orbital railway, really supporting that agglomeration economy that Dr. Clos spoke about, getting ready for completion. Even in London, where it's hard to build anything, we've created Crossrail, the Elizabeth line, opened in 2022. We've already had, more than 10 million riders in this thing. So the key issue these days is not that people don't understand the relationship between metropolitan transport, densification of buildings, housing affordability, which is the first time we've mentioned those 2 words, but the relationship between the ability to build metropolitan infrastructure and to tackle housing supply and affordability issues through densification is now becoming real to some European governments. And as a consequence, it's possible to build very complex, I know, financial models to do some of these things, but it is now possible again. So Dr. Clos is right, I think, that there's a new cycle beginning where this is becoming possible again. And of course, every time I come to Barcelona, I remember that over a 12-year period from about, I think it was 96 to about 2008, Madrid hugely expanded its metropolitan infrastructure, financed by the city, the commune, and the national government, at the same time that Barcelona did not receive anything like that kind of investment. So investment in infrastructure is a competitive tool between certain metropolises as well.
Thank you. You mentioned the next topic, housing. How are we going to house everybody that is coming in the metropolitan areas and ensure that it's going to be sustainable?
May I?
Yes.
The privatization of the market of housing, it's a fact. I think that Saskia Sassen, in one of her late books, explained that very well. And this famous word, financiarization, it's something that has become a popular word. But I think that we are in a human right, the right of housing, and therefore we need to review our social contract.
Yep.
And we need to say again that we probably ought to provide affordable housing for the people who cannot follow the market. I was in this country in the year 78, 79, 80 and 81 in the preparation of the Spanish law on the National Health Service. And I remember, because I am medically trained and I came from the UK and knew a little bit the National Health Service in the UK. Therefore, I was in several of the teams that we were preparing the National Health Service of Spain, which, by the way, is working quite well. With its problems, but working quite well. And as happens with many of the countries that they have something like a National Health Service, the total cost for the country is a little bit less than the countries where they don't have a National Health Service. Therefore, our welfare state that we created after the dictatorship and the beginning of democracy in 78, 79, 80, 81, and 82, when for the first time the government was able to address these questions, they were able at that moment to provide the National Health Service, the General Education System, and the General Pension System. These were the three main general laws that established the backbone of our National Health Service. Our welfare state. The historic anomaly was that at the same moment, in '79, Thatcher and Reagan were destroying the National Health Service and all this welfare state in Europe. Then in Spain, we are always the last and badly located in the time.
The last mover advantage.
Whenever was already tired of the National Health Service and all that, the welfare state, we began our welfare state. But in our welfare state, it was not possible to put the housing because our economy was exhausted already, and etc. But I really think that if we want to have a peaceful society, we need to consider really recover the idea of the affordable housing for the people who cannot pay a full house. And this is, it was not as difficult for us to do the National Health Service. Of course, the first intent of the law to go through Parliament only had the support of the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, that at that time they had 19 congresspersons, members. All the rest, center, nationalists, and right, against. But now, nobody wants to touch that. Although some regional governments are trying behind the table to deteriorate the system in order to generate an alternative. Therefore, I think that in Europe and in America, we need to create a share of the market, of the stock of housing, which is out of the market. In health, the part of the health business which is out of the market in the National Health Service tends to be nearby 80%. Education similarly, 80 and 90%. Pensions also 80-90%. In housing, I don't think that we need an 80-90%. I think that we have enough with 30%, something of this order. We have a stock of houses in Spain of 23 million, 25 million, and therefore 1/3 of that is 7 million. Then to have 7 million of houses which are outside of the dynamics of the free market is not as difficult and not as expensive as many think. But you need to have the courage, political courage, to aim at that. And still in Europe, we don't have, it's not only Spain, it's France, it's Netherlands, Germany. We don't have now the consensus or the agreement to make this movement. But if we would be able to, will have the capacity to do so, it could be done with much less expensive, cheaper than all these other current policies of trying to domesticate the market, trying to, I don't know, very fancy things, which with my age, I think that they are not really feasible. Politically, they are not feasible. But to get an agreement that 30% of the housing market is going to be taken out of the market dynamics and to be controlled by the some in national agency or whatever. It's a clear, more realistic and less traumatic decision. Even I understand it is a very tough proposal.
Thank you.
I think they say in Spanish, estoy completamente de acuerdo con Dr. Clos, no? That's more or less how they say it. So
Thank you.
I really agree with that, and I'll just say why I agree with that. I think that this is the big social contract problem, affordable housing. The thing that undermines everything we've said about the advantages of cities is the problem of affordable housing. It's the thing that takes away the idea that the city is a place of opportunity, because it turns cities into places of barriers. And if you look locally in Barcelona, and I'm a visitor here regularly, it's a strange thing, because you would say the city has done almost everything that is required to attract population and almost nothing of what is required to accommodate population. And it's a kind of strange clash of two different approaches. I agree with Dr. Clos about the dependence on the private market. I think it doesn't work. I think we need a big mixture of tenures, and the idea of a national program, probably that's a good idea in Spain, if you could build that social contract for it, 30% in the public sector, great. Sorry, did I touch something? Don't know. But at a very practical level, to build that housing, supposing you did have 30% was going to be owned by the public sector, you still have to be skillful in how you do it. So the ownership matters a lot, but how you do it matters a lot. So transit-oriented development with medium density, mixed use, high amenity, cleverly located housing with a quality of housing that is equal to the market, because the reason we stopped doing public housing in many parts of Europe is because the quality was so bad, and the public housing had the tendency to concentrate all of the poor people in one area and therefore concentrate the rich people in another area. So it had a segregation effect that was very bad. So transit-oriented development, intelligently using public land to underpin the cost of building the housing, public land that's no longer needed for previous purposes because of technology advances, particularly in things like engineering, works and everything else. We should think much more carefully about how the public participates. We have two shining models that everybody talks about. The Vienna model, where most people are renters, but the public sector has a different percentage of each apartment in ownership. The Singapore model, where most people are owner-occupiers, but the government is somehow a part shareholder in the property that they own, but the value increase in the property comes to the citizen, not to the government, and they increase the contribution that it makes to their pension and their other costs. So these are interesting models that have grown up over time, where it's not this 30% is public sector and this 70% is market, but in all of those houses, there's a different level of public sector participation. That's another way to achieve some of what Dr. Clos is talking about.
I would like to hear a little more on your ideas of promoting density in the metro area.
Well, it's totally a constatación en español. I don't know how you say it in English. It's just knowing our reality. The problem that we have in our local reality is that we have become used to build in very low densities, and we have now many cities around the big cities which they have very low density, and very low density has a lot of proponents. First, the occupants. Second, the developer. Everybody likes to live in a very low density space with a garden and if could it be a swimming pool, etc. But the problem is that this is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because there's another topic that we have not talked here yet, is that who is in charge of the payment of the urbanization costs? Who pays the urbanization cost? The drainage systems, the lighting, the gardening, the water,
Sewage,
whatever, sewage collection, etc. And one of the advantages of the developed city, the historical city, is that the capital that was spent in the past in today value has been already amortized, and then we use our drainage system for free. You know, the people of Barcelona, they think that the drainage system of Barcelona is for free. If it were not because during the games we needed to do several underground cathedrals to avoid the flooding of some of the neighborhoods, nobody would know that there are something that is called urbanization costs. Who pays for the urbanization costs?
Yeah.
And in the current Spanish law, the urbanization cost is paid mainly by the new development, by the new extension of the city. Every extension of the city needs an urban plan, and in this urban plan there's a balance between urbanization costs and urbanization benefits or profits. Urbanization cost is the drainage, paving, streets, land for premises, etc. That is always given by the developer. And what he obtains in the other balance, the buildability rights, the right to build and sell in the market, whatever he can sell in the market. Then in this kind of balance, you need to find a proper equilibrium, because if this is not in balance, then the developer stops developing. And if he goes very fast, it's because you have given him a lot of buildability rights and not enough costs. Then you need, this is a very tricky question that all urban planner needs to know very well. Urban planning is not drawing only. It's counting the cost and surplus of urbanization, of the urbanization process. Then, why densification? A moderate densification. I always talk about 10,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, 8,000 if you like, but of this order. No, I am not in favor of high. Why I am advocating for these 6,000-7,000 inhabitants per square kilometer? Because now we are building in Spain at 2,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. And with 2,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, the cost of urbanization that every one of them needs to pay, it's impossible. It doesn't cover the cost of urbanization. And then the cities produce bad urbanization, that after 5 years you need to rebuild. And therefore, it's an economic balance, it's economic sustainability, it's social sustainability, because you aim at needing the different activities of the society, sustainability, because the sprawling, it's consuming a lot of land, and it's one of the least environmental thing that you can do. Therefore, to agree on a balanced urbanization of something like 8,000, 7, 10, etc. I don't claim urbanizations of 40,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, or 50,000 like Manhattan, no, or 100,000 like in Hong Kong, the most dense city in the world, but only about 8, 9, 10. By the way, with less than 5,000 inhabitants, there's no need to put metro. Yeah. The metro is a bad investment, yeah, because the cost of running the weight of the iron of the wagons, it's more than the clients that you are going to have. Therefore, you have a cheaper means, like buses or whatever, or electric cars, or I don't know. Technology will provide also mobility for low density. But with the kind of city that we are dreaming, where we want the economies of agglomeration to provide wealth, sustainable wealth, it needs a basic density. And this is not what we are doing in Spain now. All the ads that you see about houses selling in this or that village nearby Barcelona, near Sitges or near El Maresme or in Manresa or whatever, they have less than 2,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. And with that, we are bankrupting the urbanization process.
Okay, thank you very much. I was told that we don't have much time, and we would like the audience to raise some questions to the speakers. We missed a lot of topics that are here, but I would next time we'll have another conversation with 2 hours ahead. And if somebody wants to ask something before I close the session, okay. Nobody? Oh, Francesca.
I cannot resist. Thank you very much for your points, and especially for the overview by the chairwoman in this case. Very briefly, what about the unexpected processes that we have at the very present moment? It's true, as you said, how the urban growth not always goes hand in hand with demographics. Today we saw in the newspapers and the media how in Iowa, Google is just reactivating a nuclear plant. And this is because, you know, the digitalization process, which is going very, very fast, is just changing all the parameters we had about sustainability, because they need so much energy. And what about the global supply chains? That they are just imposing a very specific lifestyle in the way we eat. So we need more distribution centers, and they are consuming more land, because they are just built outside the cities, in the middle of these urban sprawl areas. And what about online shopping, which is also increasing this? So just to show some examples of dynamics that they are just speeding up and feeding the urbanization process, and they are not really directly related with demographics. So I would like just to have some points on this unexpected effect that we didn't think about that. Thank you very much, and congratulations again for the Càtedra, for the BR and the UPF.
Thank you very much for your comment. And one thing that we missed is precisely the anticipatory long-term planning that all cities should be thinking of, because all these issues that are raising and that are like Virginia, they are moving out because of the noise of the data centers and things like that, which nobody thought about. So do you want to comment on that?
All I will say is I agree. I mean, the acceleration of unforeseen change is much bigger than the acceleration of foreseen change. The examples you were just talking about, I think of as the spatialization of the digital economy. That's one way of thinking about it. We have a big set of unknown changes to do with pandemics, and especially now to do with conflicts as well. We talked a little bit about the issue of migration, which I think is about to be exponentially more dynamic than we've had before. And of course, here in Spain and in many countries of the world, we have hugely accelerating and interdependent challenges in climate, resources, weather, and everything else. So I think we are in an era of heightened dynamism, great uncertainty. And in that regard, I think this creates an extra premium for the sustainable metropolis. That if you like, I like to put it this way, we're in the century of cities, but we're in the half millennium of the nation states. These unexpected changes, which are accelerating, are really exposing the weakness of the nation states as a governance model. And that's why there's so much disappointment and frustration and fear and anger, the breakdown of the social contract, whether it's wildfires or it's droughts or it's the hum of the data centers. And by the way, electrification won't solve that problem. I think we know that. I was in a conference last week where everyone's talking about the low orbit economy becoming the location for the data centers in the future. A very sort of interesting set of ideas. But I think all of this comes back to the sustainable metropolis, because what it suggests is that the sustainable metropolis doesn't just need to manage housing and transport and planning and labor markets and optimizing the agglomeration benefits whilst minimizing the segregation side effects. The sustainable metropolis also needs to anticipate what we don't yet know, and it needs to therefore be very agile and very intelligent, and we're a long way away from that. But if you spend any time, as I do, in Singapore or in Shenzhen or sometimes in Tokyo, you do begin to see examples of metropolitan area style governments that are thinking in 50-year cycles and are thinking about the unanticipated. So it's not impossible.
See, I would like to comment on the issue of agriculture. Well, in fact, we don't have a problem of agricultural land. In fact, in the Spanish geography, the agricultural land is diminishing during all the 20th century and even today. And of course the population is increasing and the productivity of the existing agriculture is growing very fast. That means that this idea that the cities are going to eat all the farm and fertile land is not something that we expect in the near future. As I said before, the urban population, if we put them in 10,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, we can put a lot of them in a very, and it's not a problem, and there's no menace to the agricultural land and agricultural productivity. In fact, one of the most interesting things is the increase of the productivity of agriculture, which is extraordinary, and it's related to genetics, to new irrigation systems, etc. Probably the water is one issue that we need to tackle with, but we will see, I don't know. Although we have desalination as one of the technologies that now, even in our city, it's something that is current use. The energy, it's another topic. Energy, again, it has been with humans always. The humans have always tried to have available energy as near as possible in order that not all the work, in physical terms, work, be done by the human itself. we delegate to the machines or to the animals, first to the animals and then to the machines, the work, the heavy work. But that consumes energy. But I think I am optimistic in the energy consumption with what I have seen in the evolution of the photovoltaic energy and others. I think that in reality we have addressed already the problem. Another question is that there are some actors that they are not interested on accelerating the change of model. But I think that we don't need more coal anymore. We don't need nuclear, I think, at least for what we need in this planet. One thing is if we want to go to Mars or other futuristic ideas. And today the Russians, they have launched a missile with a nuclear plant as an engine, which is quite daring. Therefore, I think that we have aeolic, photovoltaic, and we have also geothermal, and we have on the backyard we have hydrogen. Therefore, I think that in fact, I dare to think that we have already addressed the problem of energy. This is why in Zaragoza now, in Aragon, as there's a lot of wind and solar, now there's a frenzy there to see who is building the macro centers. But by the way, I am not sure that the macro centers of information treatment is something that is going to stabilize itself. I was very surprised by the Chinese with this model of IA, which runs with much less energy consumption. Then one thing of the technology and the innovation is that we don't know what is going to happen in this world of innovation in the next, not in the next 20 years. We don't know what is going to happen in the next 4 years or 3 years. You know, I have my sons, both of them, they have already electric cars. And they are used already to the electric car. And they manage their own anxiety of not having petrol at a certain distance. Perhaps they take a pill for the night. I don't know what is the technology, but they address the problem. When I go with them eating some costelles a la brasa, they don't complain, they don't talk about that. One thing that I want to close my intervention is possible. Something that we don't touch yet, and it's something that is coming, is the psychological capacity of the humans to manage the new society that is emerging. This is something that, for me, it's a question mark, because we are seeing already a high level of consumption of anxiolytics, antidepressants, especially in urban areas. We have a lot of isolation, we have seen suicidals. I don't know if this is only a temporary adaptation to the change of the social model, or if the speed of the transformation is so high that we animals, human animals, we don't have enough tools to manage this speed of change. You know, the number of psychologists, psychiatrists, both in the private sector especially and in the public sector, counselors, you know, people that just speak to the people, professionals. You know? psychologies of cats, psychologies of dogs, psychologies of horses. I don't know, what is happening? Are we stressing the limits of our mental system, or is just something that it will change in a couple of years? But the consumption of illegal drugs, it's also a symptom, and the growth of this market, it's another symptom that probably we are beginning to cope with a system that in itself perhaps is approaching to the physical in terms of mental physical capacity to cope with. But I think because that is something that we will first detect in the cities.
Yeah, I will tell you a secret. This is not a worry of Mr. Clos that just pop up now. 20 years ago, when I was directing the dialogues of the forum, he asked me to do a dialogue on the social brain with all the neurologists that were coming into from all over the world to talk about the organization of society and the stress and the forms that society was taking and coping with the changes of urbanization, movement of people, migration, and so on. So we got a book out of that called Social Brain, and I think it was very interesting. So yes, I agree with you completely. Greg, is there any questions? Oh, there is one there.
Yeah, it's important. Innovation is important to find new ways of. Well, sorry, I have some notes, but actually, I'd like to ask how to ensure or how to keep expanding Metropolis, since I think we've reached a limit. And then you were talking about not creating new ways of public transport, but then how do we make sure that we are moving in a sustainable way? If I'm living in another site because I can afford living in a city and then I have to use my private transport. And yeah, would you consider homelessness only living with like under no, how do you say, sostra?
Roof.
Roof. But living with more than 4 or 5 people in one room. And I said, it's important innovating, but should we face firstly the problem that we're facing, and then we can focus on innovating? That's my question. Well.
Yeah, this is a very important topic. The homeless issue, it's a political issue. It's a follow-up of what we said before about the affordability of housing, and if people do live, hacinated in a room, and that's another form of infra-housing. Therefore, a good, a proper ethic and society should address this issue. And it's not extremely expensive. The question is not when, and this famous English, when there's a will, there's a way. It's not so expensive to solve this question.
Yeah, I was in a debate, and they were like, it's not a Spanish issue, but it's an European issue.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then they were talking, like worldwide. But my point of view is that they find places to gather together, like social, political, and in this case economic, or the ones that build those buildings. But then they cannot find or reach an agreement. So what what would be the solution, or what would be the point to find a common agreement to solve this problem? Because they keep working on it at a European level or a worldwide level, but they cannot reach any solutions. They cannot find any ways of raising this money because they have other things to focus, security.
Yes, but we know of experiences in different cities, both in America and in Europe, that they have created special units of social assistance, which are tasked with the responsibility of helping these homeless to recycle their living experience. And we in Barcelona, we had that, even in housing, in Ciutadella also. There are many good exercises where with the proper dedication of time and resources, professional resources, you can address this issue. You improve a little bit. Only the extreme pathological, psychiatric, pathological, very complex systems, they are not reacting positively to this kind of specialized assistance. By the way, people is afraid that with artificial intelligence, we are going to lose many jobs in the economy. You know, here you have another big place to allocate a lot of people to help the other people. Something that we need to address and we need to accept in a more intelligent manner the fact that they are people who can follow the changes of the society and that there are people who cannot. And this is not a question only of values. This is not because they are lazy or they are guilty of their situation. This is because probably they don't have the resources to follow the speed of our society. Therefore, we need to be more realistic in this sense and recognize that we have an issue here and we need to address this issue. Because in the so-called neoliberal society, you forget about these people and you resort to the idea that they are infrahumans or that they are guilty or that they are etc. If you read or you follow Sapolsky, the neuropsychiatrist of Stanford,
ciao di nuovo
you will have...
Iniziamo con la seconda parte di questo workshop e presenterà il professor Salvatore Tedesco. Salvatore Tedesco insegna estetica presso il Dipartimento di Architettura dell'Università di Palermo. È autore di 13 monografie, fra le quali l'estetica di Baumgarten, il metodo e la storia, forme viventi, morfologia estetica, fuoco pallido, la poesia e la forma del nostro tempo, Artemisia Gentileschi. Curatore di numerose edizioni di classici filosofici della modernità, da Baumgarten a Sisterman.
Is it possible to keep expanding Metropolis?
Sorry?
Is it possible to keep expanding Metropolis or to keep expanding cities?
Yes, I with proper density. What we cannot is spend metropolis sprawling. We need to increase, to enlarge a little bit the metropolis only with density. That means that the land that we are going to add, it's very limited, in order that the cost of urbanization also is affordable. It all goes together. It's not for one reason that we advocate for increased density. We advocate for increased density not just for environmental reasons, but also for economical reasons, for productivity reasons. There are quite a number of reasons. To build at 2,000 inhabitants per square kilometer is a mistake, and it's an error. It's something that shouldn't be done. But the problem that we have here is that there's a lot of people in favor of growing at these low densities. Only the rich, the very rich, could pay living in isolation in a mountain. Only the rich, but the extremely rich. And then the question is, they should exist, the extremely rich? That's another topic. But you know, if you want to have the service of the society, health, education, insurance, pharmacies, whatever you need when you grow up, then you need to live together where these services are. You know, I like sailing. I could take a boat and sail around the world, but this is not something that I recommend to everybody.
Okay, I'll take one more question. Now we have three. Okay, we'll take the three of them quickly, all together, and then I have a final comment from Greg and from Joan, and we have to be closing the session.
To evacuate.
While that microphone goes, let's make the point that there are 300 million people homeless around the world, and there are 1.1 billion people living in informal housing. So we have a major challenge there, and Dr. Clos made the point that homelessness is not just created by a lack of homes, it's created by very complex biographies. There's a huge analysis that shows that since we closed our mental health institutions and since we had people leaving the military and everything else, that's really grown. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that cities don't create homelessness, but cities attract homeless people. And you have to think about the complex geographical dynamics of that. There's more to say about that.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, thank you. I think it was super interesting. And then I have a question regarding the political environment that we live in nowadays and the rise of far right related to the cities. Because I think one of the main drivers of the main causes of this city growth was globalization. And I think there's now a political trend on deglobalization and on trying to be more protective and trying to be more national sufficient. So my question is, how do you think this rise of far-right policies, as we've seen in some countries of Europe, will affect the growth of cities and this global network of cities?
Shall I start? So
let's take the other questions, a couple of more, and then you can answer.
Hello. Thank you for all the comments. It was very interesting. I wanted to ask about one of the topics that you covered, which is affordable housing, because we've been seeing it very recently, especially here in Barcelona. And so I wanted to ask if, with the problem with affordable housing, do you think this is going to create a migration outside of the metropolitan areas? Because we've already seen population moving to the peripheria, and the housing in the peripheria also rising its prices. And so if this does become a real problem, what would be some ways to solve it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Antoni, thank you.
I would like to thank everyone. For all the speakers for the interesting discussion, and all the participants and the students that came. And I didn't force them to come. I asked them to come. And some of them are my students. I wanted to final with a question. It's kind of a paradox, that Barcelona being a city that is so important in the global scene as a model for many things, for good and for bad. But we fail as a university to provide professionals in that area. So Barcelona has had a lot of tradition that everything has to do with cities has to be architects. None of you are architects.
No.
None of us is architects, only Barbara is architect.
She's a very special kind of architect.
Yeah, there's a special architect. Yeah. So I'm thinking, what students should study should do in order to become professionals in the global urban scene in the future? So that would be my question.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. Your turn.
So I'll go very quickly and say that, as I said earlier, the responsibility of every metropolitan area is also to think about the non-metropolitan areas. And there's a huge evidence now in economic geography of the consequences, particularly of the global financial crisis, in creating, as it were, a reconcentration of wealth in the metropolitan areas and a deconcentration of opportunities and wealth in the other areas, smaller towns, post-industrial regions, agricultural regions. And you can map this very closely, particularly if you look at the work of Professor Andres Rodriguez Posse, who's written extensively about this. The left-behind regions and districts are the ones that are voting very strongly for the far-right policies. So there's a link between the unconscious metropolitanization and the rise of the far right. I don't agree that we're actually in a process of de-globalization. It's a word that's used quite a lot. I think globalization is, in a certain sense, alive and well. It's just not very popular anymore. So there's popularity in talking about de-globalization. So I think that's important. On the affordable housing point, Dr. Clos already said it, but I want to say it in another way. The shape of the metropolis in the future is not a sprawling shape. It's a shape where a metropolitan area is connected with other urbanizing areas into an urban region, an urban macro region, sometimes called a macro metropolis, that it's the connectivity within the metropolitan area that drives the agreeable density that Dr. Clos spoke about, which is productive, sustainable, and inclusive. And then it's the connectivity between the metropolitan areas that creates the capacity for growth. So if you're in Catalonia, you start to think about Girona and Tarragona and Lleida being part of a metropolitan area in which Barcelona is a core, but you have other connected nodes, and eventually moving out towards Zaragoza and beyond. So think of not the city and the metropolitan area, but the city, the metropolitan area, the region of metropolitan areas that are connected, the system of regions and how they work together. Connectivity and density and how they work together is really key. And then perhaps I just say one thing about Barcelona and your question, Tony, if I may, which is the funny thing is that in the universities that I visit a lot, everybody is talking about cities. The geographers, the economists, the political scientists, the architects, the urban designers, and now the mathematicians, the social scientists, the doctors. Everyone is talking about cities because urbanization is the dominant process of our species now at this time. It's why I'm so interested in what happens when we get to peak population, and then afterwards, suddenly we're the members of a species that's in decline. It's going to feel very different. We're going to have different dreams when humankind is no longer growing. And as Dr. Clos said earlier, it's not so far away. So I sort of think that for students who are here in the room, the city is the context of economics, of sociology, of theology, of literature, of mathematics, of physics, of chemistry. The city is the context. And so understanding the role that the context plays in the development of that subject is critical to being good at that subject, but also lending that subject to the service of cities, which is about how you serve humankind.
Thank you, Greg.
Very good.
Final words?
I totally agree with Greg. Then I don't have much to add. But on the issue of globalization, it's a funny process by which the economy was open and the movement of goods and services and finance around the world increased during the first mandate of Donald Reagan, and it has had positive and negative outcomes. In the positive outcomes is that they took 500 million Chinese people out of absolute poverty. And is one of the most important changes of the world, the human civilization. Then at the same time has produced the deindustrialization of some former industrial countries. And here is where Trump and the nationalistic leaders of the new extreme right, it looks like they are against globalization, but I think that what they are really is nationalistic. I think that the globalization or the neoliberal order had a photo, a moment where it was finished. And this photo is the President Bush, Paul Walker, the Secretary of State of Economy on the States, this chap, tall one, and Bernanke, all the three in front of the House in Washington, asking the Congress people in the House to approve the recovery package of 750 billion, I don't know, dollars. When the state was asking the Congress to bail out the banking system of America, this was the end for me of neoliberalism. What we have therefore after that, it's a kind of convulsive reaction where we are seeing many different things. One was the recovery package, which was where this $700 billion. Then came immediately, this was the helicopter money, the printing money. The second time that was a huge input of money to the society was by COVID epidemic, and then because the people ceased to work. And that a second influx of money. This, for the first time in our recent history, we have seen the biggest two central banks of the world printing money at the highest speed to bail out the economy because of these two crises, the financial crisis of 2008 and the COVID crisis of 2020. The problem that these two movements have created in the global economy, it has been a little bit of inflation, a little bit, not much. And the inflation, it has not been related to these two bailouts, but it has been related to the oil price crisis of the war of Crimea and the stopping of Russia to export oil. Nothing to do with printing money for 2008 or printing money for 2020. Now it's generating a huge misunderstanding where there's a confusion, but it's a wanted confusion. I think that there's no interest in clarifying what is going on. But to my appreciation, what is going on is that these two experiments of increasing the monetary mass have been a success. The only unexpected result is the increase, as you have said, of the extreme right. And this is something that we still don't know how to address. The question of metropolis and growth in housing. Now let me stop about the global problems and talk about the local problems. In the local problems, in the metropolitan area, we have had such an huge deindustrialization, that we have enough urban land in our own now abandoned brownfields, that we don't need to grow a single square meter in our cities to build 200,000 inhabitants in the metropolitan area. Only addressing the topic of re-urbanization, which is different than new urbanization. Re-urbanization is recycling the urban fabric that you have. If we dare to design a process to recycle our urban stock, we have enough land, space, and whatever to produce the kind of housing that we need. And trust me on that, because you will not hear that, not in the press, not in the speeches of the people who pretend to address the issue of urbanization, no. But with urban recycling, especially of the decaying post-industrialism of our economy, we can have enough assets to relocate most of the people that we need.
Robert.
Okay.
And the students, sorry,
Students,
los tres, yo no me acabo el plato siempre.
Yeah.
Perdón.
The students, yeah. Go ahead.
Es un problema, esto es un problema. Tenéis un problema. Tenéis un problema. En este país, el urbanismo in this country, in this country, the urbanism is left only to the schools of architecture.
Which is crazy.
It's crazy.
No, but it's not just crazy.
We have to do the same thing.
It has to do with our politics, internal politics. Because, you know, now we had one school in the past or two, now I think we have 10 in Catalonia, something that is
crazy.
Absolutely crazy.
Does that mean
and then when they don't have work as an architect, they
work as anything.
They want to intervene, creating new activities, and urbanization is something there waiting, is a like of pollo.
But does that mean that this initiative is a special new initiative to create a focus on cities that's not from the architects?
Well, there are the architect is a co-founder.
Yes,
but,
but she's a special architect.
Yeah.
You should ask the School of Architecture what they think about this.
Okay.
We will.
No, but the problem is that architects, being in the city hall as a mayor, I needed to deal every day with my architects, my economists, my engineers, and my
and never with your
geographers. My lawyers.
And which ones did you enjoy most, Dr. Clos?
The architects.
The architects.
Because at that moment, the architects, the School of Architecture of Barcelona was extremely creative, and it was politically well oriented, and it was generating projects, interesting projects, one after the other. But that is not anymore the case. And what I see is that we don't have lawyers now. And lawyers are fundamental in urbanization, because urbanization is based on the rule of law. And there's no lawyers, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
but we should say that all architects are good people and they will go to heaven.
Yeah.
And there's no problem about that. But what Tony is saying, I think, is very important. Urbanism is an interdisciplinary activity. It's an interdisciplinary activity. It needs architects and geographers and political scientists and economists and mathematicians and cultural people. It needs everyone. It's interdisciplinary. And Dr. Clos is right. It's about rules, but it's about rules that produce something better than is possible without the rules, right?
Okay. Thank you very much. 30 minutes to close the session. Thank you to the speakers. As I said at the beginning, they keep on talking and you cannot stop them. So thank you very much, Greg Clark. Thank you very much, Joan Clos, for your contribution. Thank you to Barcelona Regional and to the Càtedra for the initiative. And now it's your time. Now it's your time to work, to research with your lifestyle, your arguments, and everything you're thinking to change everything that has been said. So, good luck.
Thank you. Bravo.